On a frozen Montana highway, an ex-Navy SEAL burdened by survivors' guilt crosses paths with a Lakota widow escaping years of abuse with her 2 children. What begins as a desperate rescue in a deadly blizzard becomes a journey of trust, healing, and rebuilding a shattered sense of safety. As winter presses in around them, their quiet moments, shared meals, steady work, and small acts of courage, grow into something neither expected, the possibility of a new beginning. This is a story of resilience forged in the cold, compassion that melts fear, and second chances that arrive when hope feels impossible. The wind howled across the frozen Montana plains like a wounded animal, its icy teeth raking across the abandoned highway. Andrew Keller tightened his grip on the steering wheel as his truck crawled forward through the blizzard. He had only been back in Montana for 2 days. 2 long, quiet days spent on his family's ranch, trying to pretend he wasn't still haunted by the ghosts of men he couldn't save. His years as a Navy SEAL had ended with a mission gone tragically wrong. He survived, his brothers didn't. And survivor's guilt clung to him heavier than the winter sky. But fate has a strange way of sending a lifeline when the soul is at its lowest. Through the swirling snow, Andrew spotted movement, small, stumbling shapes on the shoulder of the empty road. He braked hard, heart jolting. At first he thought it might be livestock blown off a nearby property, but as he stepped out, the brutal wind carving into his jacket, the truth hit him like a punch. A woman. 2 children. All wrapped in thin coats, faces numb, steps shaky and uneven. The woman turned toward the sound of his boots crunching through snow. Her dark hair whipped around her face, and despite the storm, her eyes, deep, wary, Lakota, locked onto him with a mixture of fear and fierce resolve. "I'm not here to hurt you," Andrew called out, lifting both hands, palms open. For a moment she said nothing. Then, with a voice hoarse from cold and exhaustion, she whispered, "We had to leave. We couldn't stay there anymore." He didn't know who "we" meant or what horrors they had fled, but the tremble in her son's shoulders and the way her daughter clung to her skirt told enough of the story. "Let's get you warm," he urged gently. The woman hesitated only a heartbeat before nodding. Her strength was nearly gone. He ushered them into his truck, blasting the heat without waiting to hear their refusal. Once inside, her children curled together under his spare blanket. The woman watched them, her hands shaking as she tucked the edges around them. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Mika," she replied. "Mika Red Cloud." "Andrew Keller," he answered. As he drove them toward the ranch, he listened in silence. Mika spoke few words, but the truth bled through them, years of control, cruelty, and bruises that weren't always visible. She had walked away because staying had become a death sentence. She had chosen freedom, even if freedom meant crossing a frozen highway with 2 children and no plan. At the ranch, Andrew's mother welcomed them with warmth that cracked Mika's defenses wide open. For the first time in months, maybe years, Mika let herself breathe. Over the following days, survival turned into recovery. Andrew taught the children how to stack firewood, how to feed the horses, how to laugh again without watching the door. Mika helped in the kitchen, her hands steadying as the storms inside her slowly began to settle. Andrew found peace in their presence. Their quiet routine softened the sharp edges of his memories. Mika's gentle resilience reminded him that broken people could still stand. Her children's trust stitched small repairs in the parts of him he thought were beyond saving. Slowly, carefully, Mika began to smile. The fear that once lived in her eyes loosened its grip. She and Andrew often shared coffee in the early dawn, where words weren't needed. Healing moved in its own rhythm. And somewhere between the snow-covered mornings and the fire-lit evenings, something deeper began to take root. Not romance, not yet. Something steadier. Something earned. 2 wounded souls discovering they didn't have to carry their scars alone. By spring, Mika and her children had become part of the ranch, part of the land, part of Andrew's life. When she finally told him, with tears in her eyes, "This feels like home," he realized the truth he had been afraid to face. He had found his way back, not just to Montana, but to living again. Their story was not one of grand gestures, but of survival, compassion, and second chances. The kind of love built slowly, quietly, and strong enough to last a lifetime.